Alright, Terminator as well as Ultramarines fans. In this video, we are going to be taking a look at if there are differences between the OG Ultramarines Terminators versus the new Terminators that were released not too long ago. So we already know that there's going to be an obvious size difference between these action figures, but are there any more differences that we can glean off on a side-by-side comparison? There's only one way to find out. All right, let's start off this in-depth comparison with the OG Assault Cannon Terminator on the left-hand side and the release of the new one on the right-hand side. We'll see what the differences are with this review. So starting off with the top, it looks like the Primaris version of the Terminator has a deeper body here. You can see the patterning is completely different. This one has a square area, these two little bumps, whereas this has this particular design in 3 bumps here. The second difference is what I've highlighted before. This new Primaris Marine has the new Terminator pauldrons here, whereas this one has the plastic loop that wraps around the arm here. And I have clearly stated before, I prefer this pauldron better than the other one. So I'm going to say that the general design of the pauldrons are pretty much the same. Really no major differences aside from the cosmetic ones. And as we are looking at the Crux Terminatus, clearly the OG one has a very large Crux Terminatus compared to this Primaris one right here. As we are looking at the arms side by side, you can clearly see this piston is a silver color, whereas this part is not colored whatsoever. The original one appears to have sort of like a green wire. This one does not have it. And the fist section of the new Terminator is clearly larger than the old one here. For the left hand for these Terminators, they're both fixed and cannot grip anything. And then with regards to the hands of these action figures on the right hand side, it would appear that the new Terminator appears to have beefier hands than the original one. Looking at the sensor array, both of them are a red metallic. Obviously, there are going to be some variations in design. Looking at the helmeted area for this Terminator, the OG one has flat red lenses. This one has a metallic lens. It would appear that the head of the OG Terminator is wider than the one on the right-hand side. And the one on the right-hand side has these clear defined vents, whereas the vents are missing on the OG one. And then finally, the respirator area seems to be a lot larger on this original. So obviously the body is going to be completely different. The midsection of this action figure, there does not appear to have these black armored sections, whereas this one does have that. The side armor plates are a bit wider on the OG one versus this one over here. As we are looking at the back of this Terminator, it would appear that the vent section up here is a lot longer and narrower versus this one, which is shorter and more stockier looking. There's more defined knee area on this action figure right here, whereas this one does not have the well-defined knee area. I would have to say the general construction of the knee joint is pretty much the same. No differences there. So now that we've talked about the body of these action figures, let's see what's going on with their assault cannons. So you can clearly tell that the assault cannon of the new one cannot be removed. It is attached, whereas the OG one is completely free-flowing. One of the big differences between the OG one and the new one is that there is this little mechanism here that you can flip back and actually get this Terminator to grip the handle of the assault cannon. And unfortunately, this particular assault cannon is fixed and cannot spin. So on this new one, as I had stated before, there's really no mechanism to have this Terminator properly grip the handle here without finagling over here. So this area does not flip or do anything of that sort. It is static. But the thing that is not static is this part is completely rotating. So this is the side-by-side look between the new and the old assault cannon. It would appear that the length of the assault cannon is actually completely the same. However, that's where things get deviated from the construction. There's a laser sight on this assault cannon on the bottom. The magazine is all the way in the back on the OG one versus the new one, which is a lot more forward. If you flip on this side to take a look. There's just some decorative differences here. Now that we have taken an in-depth look of the differences between these two Terminators, let's go take a look at the differences between the sergeants. All right, the first and most obvious difference is that the OG Terminator has a back standard. And taking a look at the top of the Terminators, it would appear that the tops of the Terminators do follow the other ones that we had just taken a look at. The helmet of these action figures, and it would appear that the patterning of the old one has a wider look with no vents, and this one has a kind of a narrow look and with vents on this side. White stripe patterning is pretty much the same. It doesn't deviate there. Both of them have green metallic lenses. Now, it would appear that most of the differences here are completely cosmetic. And in the middle section over here, there is that soft armor area where this part is black and this part is blue here. And then there are obvious decoration changes, but the general motif is the same, where you got the side plate armor and the amulet that is hanging down. So clearly there is a design change for the legs, with the new one having a longer thigh area as well as a longer shin area too. So we flip to the bottom of these action figures. There also is a design change from the old one to the new one. Let's flip around to the back, see what differences that we can spot. There is a longer and narrow vent right here, and this one has the shorter and stockier vent to match the shorter and stockier design of the OG one. It would appear that the storm bolter for the OG Sergeant is longer than the one for the new Terminator Sergeant, and clearly this area here is longer than the one on the right hand side, and the construction of the barrels are completely different too. And on top of that, the magazine construction also is completely different. The black casing on the original one is also longer. The handle on the new one is actually longer than the handle on the old one. While we are on the topic of the weapons, let's take a look at it. It would appear that the tip of the power sword blades are different, in that this has a sharper tip. This one has more of like a blunt one. However, the general motif of the gunmetal to light silver transition is still there. In terms of the length of the power swords, the original one's length is longer than this one right here. So that is the comparison between both of these Terminators. And now it's time to close this comparison out. So what you're seeing right now is not a trick of the camera. These action figures are actually in perfect line with each other, so you can see the size difference between this OG one right here versus the new one on my right hand side. And the size difference is clearly very marked. I wouldn't say that this is a size creep that's happening. This is literally a size burst. So I will highlight a few of the comparison things that I found on the Sergeants right here. The biggest thing that I found was that the helmet was completely different from the OG versus the new one. The older one has more of a stockier, more bulkier kind of look, versus the new one has a more elongated structure. And I would have to say that the new ones, for some odd reason, feel a little bit more fleshed out. Now, talking about the assault cannon Terminators, the differences are pretty much the same differences that you see versus the OG Sergeant versus the new Sergeant. The Terminator armor seems to be a lot more developed on the new Primaris Terminators versus the OG Terminators, in my opinion. And the assault cannon for the new one looks a lot better than the old one. However, in terms of functionality, the new one still drives me crazy in that I still can't get the hands to wrap around the trigger. Now, if you're going to ask me which Terminators I prefer, weirdly enough, aesthetically, I think I actually do prefer the new action figures versus the old Terminator action figures. There seems to be, again, this quality about the new ones that are better than the old. So this is Screws and Studs. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive between the OG one versus the new one, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you are interested in picking up these action figures, you already know you can go click on the link in the description below, or you will be brought to David Toys. And before you check out, please do not forget to use the code SNS to receive 12% off of your purchase. And with that PSA being said, I will see you all in the next one.